Welcome to our course. I'm Dr. Becky Rutherford, and I'm the Interim Department Chair for Information Technology and also the Associate Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness here at Southern Poly. This class is IT6643 Issues in Information Management. And I'm actually going to be using YouTube to present some of the videos and things that we have for the content for the course. And I'll be posting this both for the in-class and the online versions of this course for this summer. This is an 8-week course that we'll have in the summer, and we're going to just briefly go over several of the things that we're going to be doing in the course, and then I'm going to be going ahead and showing everyone where to find the YouTube and so on for this first lecture. So anyway, at first, you'll note that when you go out to our section, our D2L section, you're going to have a welcome, again, from me to our course, kind of talking about when things are due. We also want to look at the fact that we will have things due every week. Being 8 weeks, we're going to have some labs. We're going to have 3 tests. Everything is take-home, however. There are no proctored exams where you have to, come and take it in class and so on. So everything will be done through D2L, and you're going to submit everything through D2L as well. So if we look at the different pieces that we're going to examine right now, let's go to content, and we want to actually look at the syllabus for the course. You're going to find that down under Students Start Here. And so when we go there and we click there, you're going to see that we're going to have our syllabus down at the very bottom. There's several other things there, including an introduction discussion where you might want to go ahead and post some information about yourself so that other people in the class will know a little bit more about you. So when we go out to our syllabus, we're going to find that it is basically, of course, straightforward, and the syllabus is going to have all of the various due dates and things that we have for the course. So you're going to have the 8 weeks listed there, and you have all of your different assignments, tests, etc. that are going to be due. The modules are also the if you actually will go to the module, you'll see that it's actually the chapters as well out of our book. So we're going to be covering actually chapters 1 through 12, and so the syllabus again continues on down, and this goes through July 6th. So you'll be able to look at the syllabus and get an idea again when things are due. As we look at other things in the course, we actually then we'll see that we have Dropbox things. That's where your labs are. That's also where you're going to find your tests. All right, they're going to be in the Dropbox. They are not in the quizzes. So you want to make sure that you go to the Dropbox to find everything that you need that's going to be due. In addition, each one of the modules, each one of the chapters, and we'll go ahead and go out to our first chapter so you get an idea here what we'll be looking at. You'll see that we have primarily 4 to 5 things under each module and each chapter. You're going to see links, okay? And these particular links are to different locations out on the web that have either short articles or definitions or things. This is actually going to be used for your various individual labs. So you want to make sure that you go out and again look at those and get an idea of what's there. The goals and everything that we have as well are there. And then we also have our slides. And the slides are, again, what we're going to be doing each week. Our particular book that we have, will have seen in the syllabus, is Herman Tavani's book, Is Ethics and Technology. And it's a small book, right? But we will get through the whole thing, of course. You'll find that the PowerPoint slides that we have are quite extensive. They go into really quite a bit of depth, more than I've seen perhaps in some other PowerPoint slides. So those will be used for you as well, along with hopefully these videos. So let's go out and look at Chapter 1 to begin with. And when we go and look at these, okay, see if we can get most of these things here so that we can see them pretty clearly. The particular book, because it's called Ethics in Technology, it perhaps might appear that that's all we're going to be talking about, but that's far from the case. There's a lot of different topics in the book, and we'll be covering some current issues as well. In the labs themselves, you'll see that I ask you to go out and find information on the web on certain current topics. So that's how we can try to bring in current issues and things that are going on, as well as talk about some of the ethical dilemmas and different kinds of things that we have in IT. So again, let's just go over and look at some of our slides, and we will proceed from there. Let me go ahead and download these because I think it'll make it a little bit easier, although perhaps maybe we won't need to. Let's see if we may just leave it like this. Okay, so getting started with Chapter 1. So, but what is cyberethics? You've heard the term ethics before, I'm sure, but what about cyberethics? It's a bit different, and so we want to look at some of the particular things there. Notice it says our cyberethics is the study of our moral, legal, social ethics, and this is also a field of what we call applied ethics, because it's looking at the impact of what ethics has as far as how technology impacts ethics and how ethics impacts technology. So we're going to kind of look at both of those. And we will also be looking at laws. Okay, so we're going to be studying different kinds of laws that pertain to this as well. When we then look at our next slide, and we're going to try to go through these pretty quickly. It is a wide range, okay, of computing and communication devices per se. Our cyber technologies, we know, of course, digital electronic devices are networked computers, standalone systems, and so on. So we have a lot of different things. In addition, we know our devices are connected. We know we're living in a world today where everything is connected. And that includes where we have different kinds of local area networks, wide area networks, even what we call MANs, metropolitan area networks. And so we see all kinds of connectivity going on. We know that. That's something we deal with all the time in IT. The term computer ethics has been around a long time, and I've always thought it was kind of interesting because computers don't have ethics. Of course, it's how we as humans deal with our technology, and that's kind of what we'll be talking about. So we're going to be looking at it from the idea of dealing with the technology itself, but also dealing with the technology as an IT professional. And so those are the kinds of things that we need to examine. A couple of quick history things here. Computer technology, it says, it really emerged in the 1940s, and this is kind of an interesting thing. It says some people thought we'd have no more than 6 computers in the world back then, and of course we now know we have millions of computers. But phase 1 through the 50s and 60s, those again were primarily our very large mainframe computers, and some of the ethical things that we had to worry about in phase 1 is what did these systems mean? You know, how would they impact us and the world and so on? And they use the term giant brains and things of that sort. They also had a fear that computers, even back then, would take over the world. And so it was a little bit of a fear factor. Phase 2 of the 70s and 80s, we basically started seeing now adding some communication. The size, of course, of the computers began to shrink and so on, so we had mid-sized computers. And one of the things that we had here were some now privacy concerns, because being able now to communicate across a lot of technologies, we were able then to share private information, and so that's a possible ethical dilemma. In addition, we started seeing, well, we were able to store and so on intellectual property. So copyright issues and things began to be a bit of a problem. And at this time, of course, computer crime started to explode. And so we saw a lot of things happening in this area. And our phase 3, which is considered from kind of the 90s till now and going forward, we know the internet has added tremendously to the connectivity that we have. And because of that, though, we have added perhaps some additional concerns, such as controlling free speech, the anonymity problem, you know, being able to not have your identity known and so on. We also run into jurisdictional problems as far as, quote unquote, who owns the internet, laws that we have for the internet, and so on. So we have several different things. Phase 4, the reason we kind of think about a phase 4 is because we know, because technology changes so quickly, that we'll probably see some additional things. And this is added, the phase 4 is kind of adding the concept of Twitter, Facebook, are new social network sites, and those are adding all kinds of new things. And so it says our cyber technology and our cyber ethics is really kind of coming to the forefront now in this area, and so we'll be looking at that. Computers themselves, notice it says, are becoming less visible as entities. We think about everything being connected, and of course we know that we have, you know, computers in our phones, for example, or computers running your thermostat at home, or various kinds of things. So it's a proliferation of computing equipment, and we know that. Also, because of that, and we now have this embedded computing technology, it's harder to say, well, that's a computer, when in reality, of course, it is. But it also has other technologies and things that it works with. So we're running into new kinds of ethical concerns. The autonomous machines, sophisticated robots, we know those are there. But one of the interesting things, and where we're just now starting some research and so on, is the nanotechnologies and the nanocomputing areas. And those kinds of things have been very interesting. We've also added some, in effect, the soft bots, or as we call them, the artificial intelligent agents, again, which we have developed, and they're becoming much more available. And with some AI types of things, artificial intelligence things, notice they talk about bionic chips and so on being implanted. But in fact, there's a lot of things going on research-wise in this area. And so this is a nice little matrix which kind of shows the time period and the kinds of things that we have. In your book, one of the things that you'll see is that, and in these slides, it mentions some case studies, so I want you to look at those, because that gets you thinking about some areas that you might not have thought about, and we won't talk about them that much, but we might bring up some for discussion, so I want to make sure you look at that. It says basically, the author feels that there are two viewpoints dealing in this area. And so we look at, has this new technology, these new connectivities, have they added anything new to our ethical dilemmas? There's two viewpoints on this. First of all, the traditionalists basically say really nothing's new. The technology has changed, we've upgraded things and so on, but our ethical dilemmas have remained the same. But there are some folks that argue, it says basically that our cyber technologies themselves have added some unique, distinct, ethical problems, ethical issues that we might not have had previously. And both sides are probably correct in many ways. In other words, it really kind of depends on a situation, it depends on the given scenario, and it depends on the given technologies. So we have to look at all that. Traditionalists, however, tend to underestimate the role about the scale of computing, the proliferation of computing, and so on, and how that affects ethics. In addition, cyberbullying, for example, it says you can bully multiple victims. You're not limited to one person. So these kinds of things, this grand scale that has occurred, has made it different, and it's made it more problematic to deal with. Those who defend the uniqueness role, it says, tend to overstate the fact that cyber technology itself has made all kinds of new effects on ethics. So we have kind of both things. One of the things that when we look at the uniqueness issue, it says this tends to confuse. Notice it says the features of the technology that are unique versus do we have any unique ethical issues, okay? We do know our technologies do create some new unique technologies we haven't seen in the past. But perhaps then do those new technologies give us some new ethical issues we just simply haven't had to deal with before. And so the premise is, and a conclusion says, well, yeah, probably. We might have some unique ethical issues that occur. A lot of what we're looking at isn't, say, a completely new ethical issue, but perhaps it's how we have to deal with it, because the technology has caused us to have to think about it differently. So we need to look at the technology itself, and then we need to look at any unique or identifying, at least, ethical issues. For instance, it says there's some scenarios, 1-4 and 1-5. And these particular scenarios, notice, they involve, number one, like a computer professional who is responsible for designing software code in a controversial computer system. For instance, we could develop computer systems very easily that would go out and that would, let's say that people were trying to apply for a mortgage, and that would distinguish, of course, all females that are applying for that mortgage and pull all the women out and basically say, no, we're not going to give them a mortgage. That's possible. It's an easy thing to do. But, of course, is it ethical? No. But in other words, so there's all kinds of things that we can look at here. One of our common ones we know is unauthorized use of proprietary material. We'll be talking about copyright later on and so on. That's a pretty big issue, actually, for the web. And so we run into common things. One of the things that we mentioned briefly is the fact that the new technologies cause us to behave differently. We may be prone to, for instance, share copyrighted work. Or if someone gets a new computer game and you've always wanted that game, and your best friend just bought it, and he says, okay, well, here, just make a copy. Those kinds of things, again, have gotten easier. The technology itself has made it easier. And so we run now into the problem that we've almost created some ethical issues and ethical dilemmas just because of how the technology itself works. One of the things we have to look at, though, is that when we start dealing with laws and other policies in this area, it says we have to be very careful because since computing interacts with so many things in the world, by making a policy dealing with a particular issue, it may be that there are other impacts that we haven't looked at for a particular policy, so we have to look at that. We've also seen that with new technologies, we create what are called policy voids or law voids, where we simply don't have a law or we don't have a policy that deals with this new technology. And so therefore, we don't perhaps know how to behave, or we don't know what might be illegal in a particular area. Okay? So those are kinds of things that we need to look at. For instance, scenario 1.5, again, which had to do with the duplication and copying of software. Notice it says in the 1980s there really weren't any clear laws about this. Software was still relatively new, especially software that the everyday person could get, and so on. So we simply didn't have laws. We do now. And so that was a in effect, policy void or policy vacuum, and we needed to address that issue. And so we've created several new laws that deal with that. The term applied ethics, notice it says it's unlike the study of theoretical ethics that we do in philosophy classes and so on. We'll look at how we deal with ethical, what we call dilemmas, in a practical way. One of your labs that you're going to be dealing with is taking an ethical dilemma. And by the way, the term ethical dilemma, to give you an example, let's say that you were working in over at Lockheed, and you were working on some software that was part of the guidance system for the F-22, and the software was going to be upgraded, and so you've actually been part of the testing team, and your team, and especially you because you're the leader of your team, believes that more testing needs to be done for the software. However, as normal, we're behind schedule, we need to get the software out the door, and we need to get it loaded and so on, and into production. So your boss wants you to sign off on the testing. This creates what we call an ethical dilemma, where you as an IT professional believe that, in this case, the testing has not been completed to the extent that it needs to be. But secondly, that you do believe that with some, say, perhaps additional testing or some other kinds of things that you could look at, that perhaps we could get things into a situation where we would feel comfortable signing off. So it creates an ethical dilemma. And one of the things you're going to look at in your lab is, I gave you a mechanism, okay, for actually looking at a dilemma and then looking at it from a logical standpoint, looking at the various stakeholders. For instance, stakeholders could be the Lockheed company itself, you as an employee, it could be F-22 pilot, whose guidance system might fail. It could be the apartment building that the F-22 crashed into, the people there. So you come up with your stakeholders and what's at stake or what's at risk. For instance, if we sign off, that's one option on the testing, or if we wait. So you look at that and you logically come up with your reasoning to present to your manager about why you believe, perhaps again, you should wait and do some more testing. But anyway, so that'll be one of the exercises that you'll be doing. So ethicists that work in applied ethics, which is again more the practical application of ethics in our professions, are more interested in, notice it says, how we apply those ethical theories and make them in a practical reality mode. So the three distinct perspectives, or at least the way that we can look at this applied ethics, it says, first of all, are the professional ethics, philosophical ethics, and then social, or what we call descriptive ethics. When we look at those areas, and we will be looking at those, you'll see that they have a slightly different viewpoint. And so that's what we want to look at. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at first is the professional ethics. Okay, so here consider the professional's role in dealing with developing hardware, developing software, developing communication systems, running the communication systems, whatever it might be. And notice here, this particular dilemma is very much like the one that I just mentioned. So they use the term blow the whistle here. And in you know, there's dilemmas of that sort, and there's also the dilemmas that I mentioned, which actually have to do with how production is done. Don Gotterbarn has been studying ethics for a very long time. And he basically says that when we talk about computer ethical issues, they're really professional ethic issues. And again, it says he believes that in the computing field, it's very similar to medical issues and medical ethics. So that we have to think about who we might put at risk: property, people, companies, etc., by what we do as computer professionals. And we have to understand that that is our responsibility to be aware of what damage we can do. And so we have to think about that. Basically, the cyberethics is really a field of philosophical analysis and inquiry. In other words, as I said, we're going to apply things logically, but we're going to also try to understand it from a philosophical, ethical standpoint of what the different types of ethics are, and then apply that, as we said, to the workplace. Notice Moor, who has actually done a lot of work and a lot of research in this also, says automobile and airplane technologies didn't affect our social policies and norms in the same way that the computer technologies have done. Automobiles and planes have revolutionized transportation, that we can get places faster and easier and so on, but they didn't have the same impact on our legal systems and even our moral systems as our computing technology, cyber technology has. When we look basically at the ethical research that has been done in this area for computing, it says there are really kind of 3 stages. And so when we're looking at this logical approach, in other words, identify a controversial practice or a dilemma, as we said. So you have to first of all figure out what the problem is. Secondly, then you want to describe the problem and then analyze the possible solutions. As we mentioned for the Lockheed example, sign off on the testing, don't sign off on the testing, and so on. We have to look at that. And then we want to apply the various ethical theories, the moral theories, etc., to this ethical dilemma to see if we can come up with a more logical solution to the problem. Okay? And so the professional and philosophical perspectives then come together. And that's an important piece in making this work. The normative inquiries, studies, etc., it says are really contrasted with descriptive studies. In other words, we actually have a lot of research out there now about how we can deal with some of these applied ethical dilemmas. And so one of the things we look at on the descriptive side, notice it says these types of cases, these types of dilemmas are all about, well, first of all, you have to describe what is the case. As we said, that's going to be our factual place. The normative inquires then what ought to be the case. And so when we talk about the Lockheed example, what is the case? Well, the case is right now, we've done some testing, we don't think it's quite ready, but they want the product out the door. Okay? What it ought to be, yes, it ought to be a completely tested product. And so those are the things that we have to try and get in the same mode. Okay, little fella. Let's see here. We lost, there we go. Okay. And so this also was another example, another scenario, really talks about the displacement of people by technology. And that has been a huge, at least moral, not exactly ethical, but moral dilemma that we've come up with. And so we have to look at what was lost and what was gained, and what can we do about it. And so here you see a nice little description of report what the case is. And then once we're into the normative side, we want to describe what we want it to be, what it ought to be. And anything that's the non-moral side, notice we prescribe and evaluate, perhaps even bring standards in, a best practice or other kinds of things that make sense. The moral side then, as I said, the ethical dilemma. Other things that we can say, this is really, though, the morals that play into this, or the ethics that play into this. Later on, of course, we'll talk about the laws that might play into something, but right now we're kind of talking about the ethics and morals. Huff and Findholt basically say that we understand pretty well the descriptive nature of our problems. In other words, it was pretty easy to come up with what the actual problem was in the Lockheed case, okay? But the normative side, especially bringing in the moral and ethical side, is more difficult, okay? But by understanding the problem and understanding the stakeholders, which is kind of the sociological part of it as well, then we can start looking at, okay, how then do the ethics play out in this issue? And so if we look at